The day my son Michael changed the locks on me, I stood on his doorstep holding my old recipe book and a bag of cookies I'd baked for my grandkids. 12 years later, that same son would be begging to live in my 7-bedroom mansion. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, hit subscribe and let me know where you're from in the comments. Let me tell you how a 62-year-old grandmother went from being locked out of her own family to owning the biggest house on Maple Street. Because sometimes the best way to win is to stop playing their game and start your own. My name is Dorothy Chen, but everyone calls me Da. At 74, I've learned that family isn't always about blood, and success tastes sweetest when served to people who never believed in you. It was December 3, 2012 when my world crumbled like a stale cookie. I'd been watching my grandchildren Amy and Ben every day after school for 8 months while Michael and his wife Linda both worked. The kids loved our afternoon tea parties where I'd teach them to make my famous butter cookies and tell them stories about their grandfather. "Grandma, you're the best cook in the whole world," little Amy would say, flour in her pigtails and chocolate on her cheeks. I thought I was helping my family. Thought they needed me. Boy, was I wrong. Linda had different plans, and Michael, well, he was about to show me exactly where his loyalty lay. "Dorothy, we need to have a serious talk," Linda announced that cold morning, standing in her fancy kitchen with her arms crossed like she owned the world. Michael sat at the breakfast table, not looking at me, just staring into his coffee cup like it held the answers to life. At 35, he'd grown into a man I barely recognized. Nothing like the little boy who used to help me bake pies on Sundays. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked Michael, setting down my purse and the fresh scones I'd brought for breakfast. Did something happen at work? But it wasn't work problems they wanted to discuss. It was me. "The kids are getting too attached to you," Linda said, her voice sharp as a kitchen knife. "They cry when you leave. They ask why you can't live here forever. It's confusing them." I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend our afternoon routine, to remember how happy his children were when I picked them up from school. Instead, he cleared his throat and said the words that would haunt me for years. "Mom, maybe it's time you found your own life. The kids need to learn independence." My heart broke right there in that kitchen, surrounded by the smell of the scones I'd woken up early to bake for them. "But where will I go?" I whispered, my voice shaking. After my husband died, I'd sold our house and moved into a small apartment, thinking I'd spend my golden years close to family. "That's something you'll need to figure out," Linda replied with a cold smile. "We're not running a boarding house here." 20 minutes later, I was standing on the sidewalk with my suitcase and my recipe box, watching Michael drive away without a backward glance. The taxi driver who picked me up was kinder than my own son had been. "Rough day, ma'am?" he asked gently as I climbed into his cab with tears streaming down my face. The Pine View Motel became my temporary home, though temporary stretched into 3 months. Room 24 smelled like cleaning supplies and disappointment, but it had a small kitchenette where I could still bake. The manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a sweet lady who let me pay weekly and never asked too many questions. "You're different from our usual guests," she told me one evening, bringing me an extra blanket. "Most folks here are just passing through. You're trying to rebuild." She was right. Every morning, I'd wake up in that narrow bed and remind myself that this wasn't the end of my story. It was just a very difficult chapter. Those first weeks were the loneliest of my entire life. I'd call the house sometimes, hoping to hear Amy or Ben's voices, but Linda would answer and hang up the moment she recognized my voice. Michael never returned my calls. The silence was worse than any argument we could have had. I started taking long walks through town, past the bakery where I used to buy special treats for the kids, past the park where we'd feed ducks on weekends. Everything reminded me of what I'd lost. But somewhere between the walking and the crying and the sleepless nights, I realized something important. I was still alive, and I still had skills that nobody could take away from me. The "Help Wanted" sign in the window of Sunshine Bakery caught my eye during one of my morning walks. Betty Morrison, the owner, was about my age with kind eyes and flour-dusted aprons. "Can you start early?" she asked after I showed her my homemade cookies. "I need someone who can handle the morning rush and knows their way around pastry dough." I started the next day at 5 a.m., my hands remembering the rhythm of kneading and rolling that I'd learned from my own grandmother 50 years ago. The pay wasn't much, but it came with something more valuable: purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was creating something beautiful again. Working at the bakery reminded me who I was before I became just Michael's mother, or Linda's problem. I was Dorothy Chen, baker extraordinaire, storyteller, and cookie expert. The regular customers started asking for me by name. "Is Miss Dot working today?" they'd ask Betty. "Her cinnamon rolls are better than my grandmother's." I created new recipes, experimented with flavors, and slowly built a reputation that had nothing to do with family drama. The best part was the young mothers who brought their children in after school. They reminded me of the joy I'd found in teaching Amy and Ben, except these families actually appreciated what I had to offer. 6 months into my bakery job, Mrs. Patterson from the church auxiliary approached me with an interesting proposal. "Dorothy, our annual bake sale is coming up, and we're wondering if you'd be willing to donate some items," she said, admiring the display of fresh cookies I'd just finished arranging. "Of course," I replied, thinking she wanted a few dozen cookies. "How many were you thinking?" "Well," she smiled sheepishly, "we were hoping you might handle the entire dessert table. People have been talking about your baking all over town." That bake sale changed everything. We sold out in 2 hours, and I had a line of people asking if I did special orders. Betty noticed the buzz around my contributions and made me an offer I hadn't expected. "How would you feel about partnering with me?" she asked one afternoon as we cleaned up after the lunch rush. "I've been thinking about expanding, maybe offering custom cakes and catering services. With your talent and my customer base, we could really build something special." I stared at her, hardly believing what I was hearing. At 63 years old, someone was offering me a business partnership. "You mean it?" "Yes. Dorothy, you're the best baker I've seen in 30 years of running this place. Let's make some money together." We shook hands right there in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and new possibilities. Our first catering job was a wedding for 200 people. I stayed up all night making 7 different kinds of cookies, 3 types of cake, and enough cupcakes to feed a small army. My hands were sore, my back ached, and I'd never been happier. The bride cried when she saw the cookie table I'd designed, shaped like flowers to match her bouquet. "This is exactly what I dreamed of," she whispered, hugging me tight. That hug meant more to me than any paycheck. Word spread quickly through town. Dorothy's Delights, as people started calling my creations, became the most requested catering service in 3 counties. I was booked solid for 6 months in advance. The real breakthrough came when the mayor's daughter asked me to cater her college graduation party. 300 guests, including half the town council and several local business owners. I created a dessert display that looked like a garden with cookie flowers, cake trees, and chocolate fountains. People took pictures. They posted on social media. They called their friends. "You need to see what this amazing baker created," they said. The next morning my phone rang nonstop. Not only did I have more orders than I could handle, but someone had posted a video of my dessert garden online. It went viral in our little town, and suddenly everyone knew about Dorothy's Delights. Betty and I realized we needed a bigger space. The little bakery couldn't handle the demand for custom orders, catering events, and our regular customers. We found an old restaurant building on the edge of town with a huge kitchen and room for classes. "What if we taught baking classes too?" I suggested, remembering how much I'd enjoyed teaching Amy and Ben. Families could come together and learn to make cookies and cakes. Betty loved the idea. We spent 3 months renovating, designing a space that felt warm and welcoming, with big windows and bright yellow walls. The day we reopened as Sunshine Bakery and Cooking School, there was a line around the block. The cooking classes became my favorite part of the business. Every Saturday, I'd teach grandparents and grandchildren to make cookies together, watching their faces light up when they pulled perfect batches from the oven. "My grandson thinks I'm magic now," one woman told me, beaming as her 6-year-old decorated sugar cookies shaped like dinosaurs. These families reminded me of what I'd lost with Amy and Ben, but instead of making me sad, they filled me with gratitude. I was still teaching, still sharing my love of baking, still making memories with children. Just different children, with families who valued what I offered instead of pushing me away. 2 years after being locked out of my son's life, I was running the most successful bakery in town and had saved enough money to move out of my tiny apartment. I found a beautiful house on Pine Street with a huge kitchen and a yard where I could grow herbs for my recipes. The day I signed the papers, Betty threw a party at the bakery. Half the town showed up to congratulate me. From motel room to homeowner in 2 years, Betty announced, raising her glass of sparkling cider. Dorothy Chen, you're an inspiration to us all. I looked around at all these people who had become my chosen family, and realized I hadn't thought about Michael and Linda in weeks. The success of our cooking school led to something even bigger. A food magazine writer visited our town and heard about our classes. She spent a whole day with me, watching me teach a grandmother and granddaughter team to make my famous chocolate chip cookies. The article she wrote, titled Finding Family in Flour and Sugar, featured a full-page photo of me laughing with my students. Within a week, I had calls from food networks, cookbook publishers, and people wanting to franchise our cooking school concept. Dorothy, Betty said, showing me the stack of business cards we'd collected, I think we're about to get really busy. She was right. Our little bakery was about to become something much bigger. The cookbook deal came first. Dorothy's Family Recipes, Building Bonds Through Baking, would feature not just my recipes, but stories about the families I'd met through my classes. The publisher loved the angle of food bringing people together, healing relationships, and creating new traditions. I spent months writing, remembering every student who'd walk through our doors, every success story, every moment when I'd watch strangers become friends over cookie dough and cake batter. The advance check was more money than I'd ever seen at one time. I stared at it for 10 minutes before depositing it, hardly believing this was real. When the Food Network called wanting to feature our school in a documentary about community cooking, I thought it was a prank call. Mrs. Chen, the producer explained, your story represents something beautiful happening in small towns across America. People connecting through food, building relationships, creating family where there wasn't one before. The filming took 3 days, with cameras following me through classes, interviewing my students, and capturing the magic that happened when people came together to bake. The documentary, called Grandma's Kitchen, aired 6 months later and changed everything. Orders poured in from across the country. People wanted to visit our school, learn our methods, and bring our concept to their own towns. Betty and I made the decision to franchise the cooking school concept. We developed training programs, created curriculum packages, and established standards for our Sunshine Kitchen locations. Within a year, we had 15 schools operating in 10 states, all following the model we'd created of bringing families together through baking. I traveled constantly, training new instructors, visiting locations, and sharing my story at food industry conferences. At 67, I was busier and happier than I'd ever been. The girl who'd been thrown away by her family had built a business empire based on teaching other families how to love each other better. The real estate agent looked surprised when I told her my budget for a new house. Mrs. Chen, she said carefully, are you sure you want to look at properties in this price range? I smiled, thinking about my business account balance, my cookbook royalties, and the checks that arrived monthly from our franchise locations. I'm very sure, I replied. I want something with a big kitchen for testing recipes, space for entertaining, and room for my grandchildren to visit if they ever want to. The last part slipped out before I could stop it. 4 years had passed since I'd seen Amy and Ben, but I still hoped that someday they'd want to know their grandmother again. The house on Elmwood Drive was perfect. 8 bedrooms, a kitchen bigger than our original bakery, and a backyard with room for gardens and maybe a small greenhouse. It was the kind of house I'd dreamed about as a young mother but never imagined I could afford. The price tag would have terrified me 5 years ago. Now, it represented the success I'd built from nothing but determination and cookie recipes. It's the most expensive house sold in this town in 10 years, the agent told me as we signed the papers. You'll be quite the celebrity around here. I laughed, remembering the days when I couldn't afford to eat anywhere but the diner's early bird special. Moving into the Elmwood Drive house felt like stepping into a fairy tale. I hired decorators, but insisted on designing the kitchen myself. It had 3 ovens, 2 refrigerators, and counter space for days. I could host cooking classes here, film recipe videos, or just bake cookies for an army of grandchildren I hope to meet someday. The master bedroom had a view of the entire town, including the street where Michael and Linda lived in their modest 2-story house. I hadn't driven past there in years, but from my bedroom window, I could see their rooftop in the distance. It felt like closure somehow, living above the people who'd once looked down on me. The housewarming party was the social event of the season. Betty insisted we invite everyone who'd been part of my journey, from Mrs. Rodriguez at the motel to my cookbook editor who flew in from New York. I spent 3 days baking, filling my new kitchen with the smells of celebration. People toured the house in amazement, taking pictures in the cookbook writing room, admiring the professional-grade kitchen, and gathering in the living room where I'd hung photos from cooking classes and franchise openings. "Dorothy," said the mayor, who'd become a friend over the years, "this house is a testament to what's possible when you don't give up on yourself." I felt proud in a way I'd never experienced before. The newspaper article about my success and new house ran on the front page of the local section. From homeless to homeowner, local baker's inspiring journey included photos of me in my new kitchen and quotes about perseverance and second chances. I didn't think much about it until Betty called me, laughing. "Dorothy, you're not going to believe this, but 3 people have already called the bakery asking if you're the same Dorothy Chan who used to babysit the kids on Maple Street." My heart skipped a beat. After 5 years of silence, people were connecting me to my old life. I wondered if Michael had seen the article. I wondered if he cared. The answer came sooner than I expected. Sunday morning at exactly 9:15 a.m., my new doorbell rang with its fancy musical chime. Through the security camera I'd installed, I saw them standing on my front porch like actors in a play I'd written in my dreams. Michael looked older, grayer, with worry lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Linda stood beside him, still beautiful but somehow smaller than I remembered. Behind them were Amy and Ben, now teenagers I barely recognized. Amy had grown tall and lovely at 17, while 15-year-old Ben looked exactly like his father had at that age. They'd found me. I took my time walking to the door, my heart pounding with 5 years of suppressed emotions. Through the glass, I could see them looking around at my circular driveway, my landscaped gardens, and the stone fountain I'd installed near the entrance. Their faces showed a mixture of amazement and something that looked like regret. "Well," I said, opening the door but not the screen, "if it isn't the family that changed their locks on me." Michael winced at my words. "Mom," he started, his voice uncertain. "We saw the article in the paper. We wanted to congratulate you." I almost laughed at the absurdity. 5 years of silence, and they wanted to offer congratulations. Linda stepped forward with a smile so fake it could have been purchased at a costume store. "Dorothy, you look wonderful. This house is absolutely stunning." Her eyes were busy cataloging everything she could see, from my marble entryway to the crystal chandelier hanging in the foyer. "Thank you," I replied coolly. "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not being told you're too set in your ways." Amy shifted uncomfortably behind her parents. "Grandma Dorothy, I remember your cookies," she said softly. "I've missed them." Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My granddaughter remembered my cookies. She'd missed them. She'd missed me. "Would you like to come in?" I asked, finally unlocking the screen door. They filed into my entryway, their eyes wide as they took in the marble floors, the curved staircase, and the oil paintings I'd commissioned from local artists. I led them to the living room, watching Michael's face as he saw the wall of awards and certificates from my business success. Photos from cooking classes, magazine covers featuring my recipes, and the framed documentary poster showed a life he knew nothing about. "Mom, this is incredible," he whispered. "You've built quite a life for yourself." The pride in his voice came 5 years too late, but I heard it anyway. Ben was staring at a photo of me with Betty and our franchise team. "Is this really all yours, Grandma?" he asked, his voice filled with teenage amazement. The bakery empire and everything? I nodded, settling into my favorite armchair, a beautiful piece I'd bought with my first cookbook advance. It started with a job at a little bakery downtown, I explained. Sometimes the best things grow from the worst situations. Linda's smile was getting more strained by the minute. I could see her calculating, planning, figuring out how this newfound wealth might benefit her family. Michael just looked stunned, like he couldn't reconcile the successful woman sitting before him with the mother he'd discarded. "We've made some mistakes," Michael said suddenly, his voice cracking with emotion. "Looking back, we handled everything wrong 5 years ago. We were young, stressed, and we didn't appreciate what we had." Linda nodded enthusiastically, though her agreement seemed rehearsed. "We've grown so much since then," she added. "The kids ask about you all the time." I raised an eyebrow. "Do they? That's interesting, since Amy just said she remembered my cookies, not that she'd been asking about me regularly." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken truths. These children had been kept from me for 5 years, fed whatever story their parents thought would justify their cruelty. Amy suddenly spoke up, her voice stronger than before. "Mom and Dad said you moved away because you didn't want to be around us anymore. They said you found a new life and forgot about us." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I looked directly at Linda, who had the grace to look ashamed. "Is that what you told them?" I asked quietly. "That I chose to leave?" Michael cleared his throat. "We thought it would be easier for everyone if we simplified the story." "Simplified," I repeated. "You mean lied." Ben looked confused, glancing between his parents and me. "What really happened, Grandma?" he asked. It was time for the truth. I told them everything. How I'd been helping with childcare every day after school. How I'd contributed financially to their household while I figured out my next steps after losing my husband. How Linda had decided I was too involved in their lives and convinced Michael to throw me out without warning. The children listened with growing shock, their faces showing the betrayal they felt at learning they'd been lied to for years. "You mean you didn't want to leave us?" Amy asked, tears forming in her eyes. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "leaving you too was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I loved being your grandmother. I loved our afternoon cookie sessions and bedtime stories." Michael was crying now, his shoulders shaking with 5 years of suppressed guilt. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was weak, and I let Linda convince me that you were interfering instead of helping. I knew it was wrong the moment we drove away that day." Linda shot him a warning look, but he continued. "I wrote you a letter once, about 6 months later. I never sent it because Linda said it would just confuse everyone." "What did the letter say?" Ben asked his father. Michael wiped his eyes. "It said I missed you terribly. That I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. That I wanted to ask you to come home but was too proud and too scared to admit I was wrong." Linda finally found her voice. "This is all very emotional," she said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "But what matters is that we're here now. We're family, and family should stick together." She gestured around my beautiful living room. "You have all this space, all this success, and well, we could use some help getting back on our feet." There it was. The real reason for their visit, delivered with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. "What kind of help?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Michael looked embarrassed. "I lost my job 3 months ago. We're behind on the mortgage." Linda thought maybe. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Maybe I could move in temporarily," Linda finished for him, her mask finally dropping completely. "Just until Michael finds another position. You have 8 bedrooms, Dorothy. Surely you don't need all this space for yourself." The audacity took my breath away. After 5 years of silence, after lying to my grandchildren, after throwing me out like garbage, they wanted to move into my house. "Let me understand this correctly," I said slowly. "You want to live in my house because you're having financial problems." "We're family," Michael repeated, like it was a magic word that erased 5 years of abandonment. "Family helps family." I almost laughed at the irony. Family, I mused, standing up and walking to the window. You're right, family should help family. Where was that philosophy 5 years ago when I needed a place to stay while I figured out my life after losing my husband? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Where was family when I was living in a motel room, working for minimum wage, wondering if my own son would ever speak to me again? I turned back to face them. I built this life without family help, Michael. I built it because family threw me away. Amy and Ben looked stricken, finally understanding the full scope of what their parents had done. Linda's patience snapped. Fine, she said, standing up abruptly. You want to hold grudges over something that happened 5 years ago? You want to punish us for making difficult decisions during a stressful time? Her voice rose with each word. We're offering you a chance to be part of your family again, to know your grandchildren, and you're going to throw it away over wounded pride? I smiled calmly. I'm not throwing anything away, Linda. I'm simply applying the same standard of family loyalty that you applied to me. You decided that your convenience was more important than my need for shelter. I'm deciding that my peace of mind is more important than your financial problems. Michael tried one more time. Mom, please. I know we hurt you. I know we were wrong. But the kids, they need their grandmother. They've missed so much time with you already. He was right about that. I looked at Amy and Ben, these beautiful teenagers who should have been part of my life for the past 5 years. They were innocent victims in their parents' selfishness. You're right, I said, causing Linda to smile triumphantly. The children have missed too much time with me. Amy, Ben, you're welcome here any time you want to visit. I have 5 years of grandmothering to catch up on. Their faces lit up with joy. But, I continued, looking directly at their parents, you two are not welcome until you prove you've changed. Linda's face went through several shades of red. You can't separate us from our children, she sputtered. We won't allow it. I'm not separating anyone, I replied calmly. I'm simply exercising the same right you exercised 5 years ago, the right to choose who's welcome in my home. I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo from last week's cooking class. You see these families. These children and grandparents learning to bake together. They understand that family is built through kindness, patience, and mutual respect, not through demands and ultimatums. Amy was nodding, tears streaming down her face. I want to learn to bake with you, Grandma, she whispered. What do we have to do? Michael asked quietly. To prove we've changed. I considered his question carefully. Start by telling your children the complete truth about what happened 5 years ago. All of it. Not your version designed to make you look better. Linda started to protest, but I held up my hand. Then get your financial house in order without asking me for help. Show me you can stand on your own feet like the adults you claim to be. I walked to the front door. And most importantly, show me through your actions that you understand what you did wrong and why it was wrong. Words are cheap, Michael. I've learned to value actions. As they prepared to leave, Ben turned back to me. Grandma Dorothy, can we really come visit you? Even if Mom and Dad can't. I knelt down to his eye level. This grandson I'd barely gotten to know. Sweetheart, you can visit me anytime you want. I'll teach you to make those cookies your sister remembers. I'll tell you stories about your grandfather and show you pictures from when your dad was your age. Amy hugged me tight. I'm sorry we believed what they told us about you not wanting to see us anymore, she whispered. I'm sorry too, honey, I whispered back. But we can't change the past. We can only make better choices going forward. After they left, I stood in my beautiful entryway, processing what had just happened. 5 years of silence, broken by desperation and need. They'd come not because they missed me but because they wanted something from me. The irony was perfect. The woman they discarded as worthless was now the only person who could solve their problems. But I wasn't the same broken person they'd thrown out 5 years ago. I was Dorothy Chen, successful businesswoman, beloved grandmother figure to dozens of children, and owner of the most beautiful house in town. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love. I had built my own life, and it was magnificent. The next morning, I called Betty to tell her about the visit. "How do you feel?" she asked after I'd shared the whole story. I looked out my kitchen window at the gardens I'd planted, thought about the cooking class I was teaching that afternoon, and smiled. "I feel like I finally got the apology I deserved," I said. Not the words, but the situation. They came crawling back, desperate and needy, to the woman they'd thrown away. "That's better than any apology they could have offered." Betty laughed. "Dorothy Chen, you magnificent woman. You've turned your rejection into the ultimate success story." She was right. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting ahead. Amy and Ben started visiting every Saturday. I taught them to make all the cookies they'd missed during our 5 years apart. We created new recipes together, took photos from my social media accounts, and slowly built the relationship their parents had stolen from us. They told me about school, friends, dreams, and fears. I told them stories about their grandfather, shared family recipes that went back generations, and showed them that love doesn't have conditions or expiration dates. "Grandma," Amy said one afternoon as we decorated sugar cookies, "I wish we'd never lost all those years with you." "Me too, sweetheart," I replied. "But look what we're building now." Michael and Linda drove by sometimes, slowing down as they passed my house, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of their children with me. I never acknowledged them, never waved, never gave them the satisfaction of knowing I'd noticed. They'd made their choice 5 years ago when they decided I wasn't worth keeping around. I'd made my choice now. They weren't worth keeping around either. My life was full of people who valued me, respected me, and loved me for who I was. I didn't need the approval of people who'd only realized my worth when they needed something from me. The final validation came 6 months later when Amy graduated from high school as valedictorian. She asked me to sit in the family section, and I watched with pride as she gave a speech about resilience, second chances, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who believe in your dreams. My grandmother taught me that being discarded by some people just means you're free to be appreciated by the right people, she said, looking directly at me in the audience. She showed me that success is the best response to people who underestimate you. I cried happy tears, knowing that my granddaughter had learned the most important lesson of all. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. As I sit in my beautiful house today, surrounded by the success I built from nothing, I think about the lessons I've learned. Family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up for you when life gets hard. Success tastes sweetest when it proves wrong the people who never believed in you. And sometimes, the best thing that can happen to you is being thrown away by people who couldn't see your value. It forces you to discover what you're really capable of when you stop trying to please others and start building the life you deserve. My name is Dorothy Chen, and this is how I learned that the best revenge is a life well lived. Today, when people ask me how I survived being thrown away by my own family, I tell them the truth. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Being discarded forced me to discover talents I never knew I had and build relationships with people who genuinely appreciated me. I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. The woman who got locked out 5 years ago was dependent, afraid, and willing to accept whatever scraps of love people threw her way. The woman sitting in this mansion today is independent, confident, and surrounded by people who celebrate her success instead of resenting it. Amy is starting college this fall on a full scholarship, and she's planning to study business so she can help expand our cooking school empire. Ben wants to learn restaurant management so he can open his own place someday using my recipes. These grandchildren understand that success comes from hard work, creativity, and treating people with kindness. They've learned more about family values from our Saturday baking sessions than they ever did from parents who threw away their own mother when she became inconvenient. The cycle ends with them. They'll build their own families based on loyalty, respect, and unconditional love. Last week I got a call from Michael. He'd found a new job and wanted to know if we could start fresh, now that their financial problems were solved. I listened politely as he explained how they'd learned from their mistakes, and were ready to be a real family again. When he finished I said simply, "Michael, I already have a real family." They're the people who showed up for me when I had nothing to offer but cookies and stories. They're the ones who believed in me when I was living in a motel room. You'll always be my son, but you'll never be my family again. The silence on the other end told me he finally understood the difference. The cooking school continues to grow, with new locations opening every month. I've written 2 more cookbooks, and there's talk of a television cooking show featuring grandmothers and grandchildren baking together. The scared woman who once lived in a motel room never could have imagined this life. But she planted the seeds of this success every morning when she refused to give up, every afternoon when she kneaded bread dough with determination, and every evening when she dreamed of something better. Success isn't about showing off to people who hurt you. It's about building a life so beautiful that you forget they ever existed. Every morning, I wake up in my beautiful bedroom and look out over the town that once watched me fall and now watches me soar. I think about the woman I used to be, grateful for her struggles because they led me to this moment. I think about the children who learned to bake in my classes, the families who've been brought together by flour and sugar, and the legacy I'm building one cookie at a time. Being thrown away taught me that sometimes the trash becomes the treasure, and the people who can't see your worth don't deserve to benefit from it. I am Dorothy Chen, and I built my mansion from the ground up, one recipe at a time. If there's one thing I want people to understand from my story, it's this. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Don't wait around hoping they'll change, don't make excuses for their behavior, and don't sacrifice your own well-being trying to earn love from people who've already decided you're not worth it. Take that energy and invest it in people who see your value from day one. Build relationships with those who celebrate your successes instead of resenting them. Create a life so fulfilling that the people who rejected you become irrelevant to your happiness. That's not revenge. That's freedom. The house on Elmwood Drive isn't just a mansion. It's a monument to second chances, proof that being discarded doesn't mean being defeated, and a reminder that the best chapters of your life might begin after everyone else writes you off. Every room tells the story of a woman who refused to stay down, who turned rejection into resilience, and who built an empire from cookie crumbs and determination. When Amy and Ben bring their own children here someday, they'll learn that greatness isn't inherited. It's earned through perseverance, kindness, and the courage to start over when life knocks you down. Betty retired last year and moved to Florida, but she calls every Sunday to check on our franchise locations and hear about the latest developments. Dorothy, she told me during our last conversation, you've created something bigger than just a business. You've created a movement. People all over the country are learning that food is love, that families can heal through shared experiences, and that it's never too late to start over. She's right. What started as a desperate woman's attempt to survive has become a network of hope for families everywhere. Sometimes the seeds of your greatest success are planted in your deepest failure. I keep a journal now, writing down lessons learned and wisdom gained from this incredible journey. The entries read like a roadmap for anyone who's ever been told they're not good enough, not young enough, or not worthy enough to dream big. Day 2847 since being thrown away, I wrote last week. Today a grandmother from Ohio called to thank me for teaching her to bake with her granddaughter. She said our cookbook helped them rebuild their relationship after years of distance. This is why I survived. This is why I succeeded. Not to prove anything to the people who discarded me, but to help other families avoid making the same mistakes. The final chapter of this story isn't about Michael and Linda getting what they deserved, though they certainly did. It's not even about me getting rich and famous, though I appreciate both. The final chapter is about transformation. How being thrown away forced me to discover who I really was underneath all the roles I'd played for other people. Mother, wife, grandmother, helper. Those were all masks I wore to please others. Successful businesswoman, beloved teacher, cookbook author, inspiration to thousands. Those are the identities I chose for myself. The difference is everything. When you stop letting others define your worth, you finally discover how valuable you really are. Next month marks 6 years since Michael changed those locks on me. I'm planning a celebration at the mansion. Not to commemorate the day I was thrown away, but to celebrate the day my real life began. Amy and Ben will help me bake a cake shaped like a key, symbolizing how being locked out opened every door I needed to walk through. My cooking class families will be there, my business partners, my franchise owners, and everyone who helped me build this beautiful life from nothing. The guest list represents my chosen family. People who earned their place through loyalty, love, and genuine appreciation for who I am. Looking back, I realize that Michael and Linda did me the greatest favor of my life when they threw me out. They freed me from a small, cramped existence where I begged for scraps of affection from people who saw me as a burden. They forced me into a vast, open world where I could discover my own talents, build my own success, and choose my own family. The woman who lived in their spare bedroom, walking on eggshells and trying not to be too much trouble, was a shadow of who I was meant to be. The woman who owns this mansion, runs a business empire, and changes lives through cooking is the person I was always supposed to become. I just needed to be thrown away to find her. As I finish writing this story, sitting in my beautiful library surrounded by awards, photos, and mementos from the life I built after being discarded, I want to leave you with this thought. Being rejected by some people isn't a verdict on your worth, it's a redirection toward your destiny. The people who can't see your value are making room for those who will treasure it. The doors that slam in your face are pushing you toward the ones that will swing wide open. And sometimes, the best thing that can happen to you is being thrown away by people who were too small-minded to appreciate the treasure they had. Trust me on this one. I'm living proof. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonates with you, if you've ever been made to feel worthless by people who should have cherished you, remember this. Their inability to see your value says everything about them and nothing about you. Your worth isn't determined by who stays or who goes. It's determined by what you do with the freedom that comes after they leave. Build something beautiful. Create something meaningful. Become someone incredible. And when they come crawling back, and they usually do, you'll be able to look down at them from the heights of your success and realize you don't need their validation anymore. That's not just success. That's freedom. 6 years ago, I was a broken woman with 2 suitcases and a heart full of rejection. Today, I'm a successful entrepreneur with a mansion full of love and a legacy that will outlast anyone who ever doubted me. The journey from there to here wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Every late night in that motel room, every early morning at the bakery, every moment of doubt and determination led to this moment of triumph. I am Dorothy Chen, and I am proof that your worst day can become the first day of your best life. The key is refusing to let anyone else define your ending. Write your own story. Make it a bestseller. Don't forget to subscribe to Granny's Voice for more stories of resilience, transformation, and the power of refusing to give up on yourself. Drop a comment below and let me know. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone threw you away? What did you discover about yourself in the process? Your story matters, and I'd love to hear how you turned your rejection into redirection. Until next time, remember, you are never too old, too broken, or too discarded to build something beautiful. The only person whose permission you need to succeed is yourself. Now go out there and show the world what they missed when they walked away from you. The camera fades to black as Dorothy's voice continues over images of her cooking classes, her mansion, and families laughing together in her kitchen. The final shot is of her recipe book lying open on a marble counter, with a dedication page visible. To everyone who has ever been thrown away, may you discover that being discarded is sometimes just the universe making room for something better. The screen displays Dorothy's Delights Cooking Schools, building families one recipe at a time, followed by subscribe for more stories of second chances and sweet success. As the video ends, soft music plays over photos of real families from Dorothy's cooking classes, showing the genuine joy and connection that food can create when shared with love rather than conditions. The final message appears. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning.